NASCAR hands out penalties from the Xfinity Series race at Martinsville. Kyle Larson's getting a documentary, and ratings are up once again. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. On Tuesday, Cars Tour, along with Fox Sports and Flow Racing, announced that the Cars Tour late model stock race from North Wilkesboro, the Friday night of NASCAR All-Star Weekend in May, will be shown live on FS1 with Dale Jr. and Kevin Harvick in the booth, joining Eric Brennan and McCandless as well. And I think that's a major win for the Cars Tour and for race fans everywhere, because there's not everybody has a subscription to Flow Racing. Now they're going to get a taste of the Cars Tour on a national platform, and that's a major win, not only for Cars Tour, but for race fans everywhere. Super excited for that. Think I'm going to have to watch that race from a plane headed back from Hawaii to Indy 500 qualifying. That's going to be a whole ordeal, but we'll talk about that when we get a little bit closer to when that's going to happen. The big news of the day on Tuesday, though, bigger than the Cars Tour announcement and all the dumb April Fool's jokes, is the fact that NASCAR has handed out their penalties from this past weekend's race at Martinsville, specifically for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. They have fined Sammy Smith $25,000 and 50 points for his last lap actions, where he dove into turn 3 on the last lap, drove through the 54 car of Taylor Gray like he was Ty Gibbs, and ultimately junked the 54, junked himself, and just wrecked that spread out onto the front stretch there, and NASCAR has finally drawn a line. Essentially, with that 50-point penalty, they've taken a race away from him. He can still point his way in, he can still win his way in, but that 50 points basically sets him back a race from everybody else in the grand scheme of things. But it's something they had to do here. You can't let the inmates run the asylum, and at some point this was going to get so far out of hand that NASCAR is going to have to respond, and that happened on Saturday night. Things just got out of hand, and you can argue that more drivers should have been penalized, and maybe they should have in-race penalties as well, because Sammy Smith was not the only culprit of the rough driving and just absolutely crashing people. Sam Mayer did the same thing. Austin Hill did the same thing as well. But ultimately, Sammy Smith got put underneath that microscope because it was the last lap and he was racing for the win there. For Sammy, though, just got to clean it up a little bit. When you've got a line of people that are wanting to talk to you after the race, you probably messed up. Regardless of how much you want to think that you were in the right and you did what you had to do, hilarious moment, though, from his spotter saying that, yeah, we just got crashed there. Dude, what do you mean you got crashed? You caused the crash. You caused the big pileup. You crashed multiple people there. Just zero self-awareness in that statement. But ultimately, Sammy Smith, NASCAR needed to respond and needed to penalize him for that. I know there's going to be people in the comments, same way in my TikTok, where like, that's just short track racing. Dale would have done the same thing. Everybody's getting soft. No, this is a professional sport. It's not a demolition derby. It's not the WWE. There have to be consequences for your actions. If you want to watch something like that, go to Bowman Gray Stadium. Get a Flow subscription. You can watch that there on a weekly basis, but it's not racing at a national level, and at some point you have to gain control back over what your competitors are doing, and I think NASCAR did that with this penalty. And hey, if it continues, when we go back there in the fall and if people still race like absolute buffoons, then you're going to have to penalize them more, suspend them. You're going to race like a pigeon, you're going to have to serve a penalty for it, head over to the box and take your week off or whatever you want to do there. NASCAR also announced that they were penalizing Taylor Gray and Jeb Burton, both $5,000 apiece, for infield care center conduct. Don't fight in the infield care center. Don't confront people in the infield care center. Don't act like an absolute moron in the infield care center. That's for medical professionals to check out drivers to make sure they are fine to leave. If you want to do that, wait outside the infield care center and then exchange your words out there, which is what we saw from Sammy Smith and Taylor Gray. That ultimately, spilled out from inside the care center to outside the care center there. The Jeb Burton incident, I believe, had something to do with the Daniel Dye situation where he said he was going to send him over the grandstand. So I assume that there was some sort of confrontation in the infield care center there as well. Ultimately, just be smarter. Be smarter, guys. Also, Jeb, sending a car over the grandstand is going to be really hard to do. Physics-wise, I mean, it can happen, I guess, if you're going to involve a ramp, potentially a rocket as well, but like at Martinsville, we're not going to send anybody over a grandstand here. But hey, you can wreck the dog food out of him as well. Ultimately, I think NASCAR got the penalty situation right here. Obviously, they didn't think that Austin Cindric did anything egregious in the Cup Series race, intentionally wrecking Riley Herbst. I did a breakdown of that on TikTok. I'll also post it to Instagram because I know not everybody has TikTok as well. And maybe I'll upload the short here on YouTube. Ultimately, when I broke it down and went kind of in slow motion, I think it was more of a racing incident than an intentional wreck, and I explain it in there. So I'll upload it and you guys can watch it and make your own decisions as well. We also learned on Tuesday that Prime Video will have a documentary, a full-length documentary, where they profile Kyle Larson's attempt to complete the Indianapolis-Charlotte double on Memorial Day weekend. Obviously, last year, rain threw a big-time wrench into his plans, and he only got to complete the 500 miles at the Indianapolis 500 and did not get to complete any of the 600 miles at Charlotte, as that race was ultimately called due to high humidity at that point. So a camera crew was following him last year. They will once again follow him this year, and that documentary will come out in 2026. I would go ahead and assume it will likely be around the 5 races that will be on Prime next year. So maybe expect it around Memorial Day weekend in 2026. But it will be very cool to see the behind the scenes look at Kyle Larson's attempt here. Obviously, his attempt was disrupted last year, and there was a lot of emotions and, people that were annoyed but happy that they're running the 500. And obviously, NASCAR put him in a bit of a purgatory there in terms of playoff chances. And there's a lot that went into that. Hopefully this year there's no rain and he can complete all 1,100 miles, because it's one of those really cool milestones in racing, especially in North America, that very few drivers actually can say they've accomplished. So for Kyle, I'm sure that would be really cool to see it done. Obviously, everybody's going to be like, what happens if he wins both of them? I think for Kyle this year, top 5 of the Indy 500 is probably something that would be pretty reasonable. We'll have to wait and see sort of what comes out of it once cars hit the track. Obviously, with the new hybrid component, it's going to be a different feel than what he had last year. But if Arrow McLaren shows up at the speedway with the same amount of speed, I would assume that he's going to be very competitive once again. And at the end of the day, more, documentary, more high quality content for race fans is never a bad thing. Prime is doing the 4-part Earnhardt documentary series this year, which will come out Memorial Day weekend. Then we're going to get the Larson thing in 26. My one big question left is, where's this Garage 56 documentary at? That happened in 2023. We're now into 2025. Are we going to have a 2-year wait for this? I know they filmed a lot of it. I need these answers at this point. And the last bit of news for the day, NASCAR's ratings are up once again. Viewership for the NASCAR Xfinity Series race was up 17% year over year. The first 7 races of the Xfinity Series schedule this year have all had over 1 million viewers. The first time that's happened since 2017. The race at Martinsville this weekend had 1.014 million viewers tune in to watch that, like I said, demolition derby that that masqueraded itself as an Xfinity Series race. But ultimately, that's a really strong number, really good for the Xfinity Series. And then on the NASCAR Cup Series side of things, the Fox Sports 1 had 2.42 million viewers tune in on Sunday to watch Denny Hamlin pick up his 55th career NASCAR Cup Series victory. That was up 11% over last year's race, which actually ran 2 weekends later in the year. It ran on April 7th last year. That'd be 2 weekends later, 1 weekend later, 1 week later, 1 week later in 2024 from when that race ran. Ratings this year on FS1 are up 1% year over year as well. And the race topped out at 2.85 million viewers as well. So really strong numbers, especially with it being on cable as well. I know, again, people are going to complain about cable and everything, too many commercials. That's unfortunately what we have to deal with when races are on cable. It's infuriating at times. I know, I'm there with you. But that's what happens when you end up with a very, very lucrative television deal as well. So ratings are up. People are tuning in. That's not a bad thing. As the weather starts to warm up, racetracks are going to get filled out even more than they already are. And hey, maybe NASCAR is actually going to be on the rise here. I think we would all love to see that. So let me know in the comments what you think about the penalty for Sammy Smith, Taylor Gray, Jeb Burton, Kyle Larson getting a documentary, as well as the ratings this past weekend. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHard.